Crystal?
Oh, it's Diet Coke.
Okay.
It's my favorite.
And we are now officially live. So welcome everyone. Welcome Crystal. Welcome Eva.
Oh.
Sorry, Ava.
It's not even my real name, so I can't be mad about people pronouncing it differently.
One day I'll get it all right.
It's okay. I've gotten Eva Lay, I've gotten all kinds of things like that. So yeah.
Well,
I've been guilty of saying that.
Lee is my middle name, so like to me,
it's my middle.
That's easy.
It's my real middle name, so that's why I picked it. Yeah.
All right, so you two take it away. I'll send any chats in the Zoom chat.
Thank you, Marissa.
All right. Well, so let's basically talk about just what is this book about? Tell us what this book is about, just briefly.
Okay, so the Good Girl's Guide to Rakes is the first book in a new series called The Last Chance Scoundrels, which opens with a scandal perpetuated by three kind of gadabout men. Two of them are the younger sons of an earl. One of them is the son of a self-made man. They cause a scandal which makes their parents say, all right, enough. You have to get your acts together and get married to respectable women within the span of a year. Otherwise, you're all cut off without a cent. So that sends our erstwhile heroes off on their respective quests to figure out how to do that. And this book, The Good Girl's Guide to Rakes, is about Kieran Ransom, who is the youngest son of an earl. And he's a well-known rake and libertine with a terrible reputation. And so he doesn't know how to go about finding a respectable bride. So he goes and he turns to the most respectable woman he knows, who is the sister of his friend, who is the son of the self-made man, her name is Celeste. And she has a spotless reputation because she is new money. So she has to be very careful about how she presents herself in society. So he goes to her and he says, all right, my friend's sister, I would like you to help me reform my image so I can find a bride. And she's like, well, okay, I'll do that for you if you take me to London's scandalous sort of wild side on the side. So it's a bargain. You give me this and I'll give you that. And from thence, shenanigans and dirty talk ensue. You're muted.
I'm so sorry. I still have a lingering cough, so I mute myself and then I forget to turn it back on. But I love that explanation of this book. It is a perfect summary for it. I felt like this book had such a great blend of like fun, almost adventurous things that happened. There were so many swoony romantic moments and it was very steamy. It was honestly everything that I want in a historical romance, just all wrapped up. And I felt like it was literally perfection. So
thank you.
Where did you get the idea to start this series? Because this is the beginning of a new series, like you said.
Right.
So what made you want to tell these particular?
I remember like being on a train coming back from San Diego with my husband, Nico Rosso, who's also an author. And we were sort of brainstorming this premise about these guys who had to find these respectable brides. And it was my editor who actually came up with the idea that the original scandal involved the brother's sister, which is horrible, but it works, I think, in this case. And I really kind of liked playing with people who were sort of like fringe dwellers, because in historical romance, we get a lot of people from the aristocracy, but I kind of wanted to see what it would be like if we played with people who weren't quite like, the dukiest duke, if you will, and stuff like that. And I really, especially with the third character, Dominic Kilburn, who is the son of a man who's recently made his fortune, I really was excited to do that kind of person who'd come up basically from nothing, a la Derek Craven, I suppose, but and then and put him into that world. So I was, and I really, there's something about writing male friendships that and also there's two brothers that I really enjoy. It's essentially like them constantly teasing each other and making fun of each other, and then it's like, I love you, you dickhead, is kind of like how their relationship sort of boils down to it.
That's it exactly. And I think that it's almost like they have this really close-knit found family group together, those
Totally.
three men. And
Right.
I love that aspect so much. And I think that it's interesting that you picked Dom to sort of have the self-made man, because Celeste's family comes from that too. Like,
Well, Celeste and Dom are brother and sister.
that's right. Of course, I know that. I knew that.
That's okay. It's all right. You read a lot of books, so the fact that you don't understand the minutiae of mine after reading it probably a few months ago, that's totally understandable.
I 100% knew that they were brother and sister. I just had a moment in my brain where it didn't connect. I actually was listening to the audio of it today to kind of refresh myself. The audio performance was wonderful too, so I really liked that.
I've requested Zara a few times after she did the audio for Dare to Love a Duke. I'm like, I really like her. So when she has been available, I've gone with Zara. I really enjoy. And then I absolutely dug how she did Sebastian in My Fake Rake. She did an excellent job with that performance. And so I've just been really, so I'm glad that you liked her, because I like her too.
She was fantastic. She made it so enjoyable. I also have a dog. Sorry. I'll try to.
Hi, Kazi.
Yeah. So something that I really loved about this book, and I feel like this is kind of a theme in all of your books, but especially in your most recent ones, is specifically the heroine kind of having a journey of self-discovery where she's letting go of everything that she's been told she had to do, that she thinks is expected of her. And she's just kind of fed up and is deciding that she's going to take the world on and do what is going to bring her joy. And I love that so much. And I think that you find such great heroes to complement that, because they want that for the heroine. So how are we going to see that maybe come into play? Is that going to be a theme in the other two books in this series?
Yeah, I definitely think so. The heroine for the second book is somebody who really patrol, like people have expectations or what they think she's supposed to be, and she's an intellectual, and so she sort of pushes back against that, which is sort of like a continual theme of mine, is sort of like women pushing back against societal expectations, but also, as you said, like with Waiting for a Scot Like You, and then in The Good Girl's Guide, it's the sort of self-discovery, which I think for a lot of women, it's a kind of a resonant theme, because I think for a lot of us, society sort of expects us to adhere to these certain roles rather than sort of fulfilling our own ambition and desires. And I always was like, well, when is it our turn? So that was something. So I have somebody at sort of in the middle of their life, like Beatrice in Waiting for a Scot Like You, which when I wrote the book, I was the same age as her, which was 46 at the time. And then I have somebody who's younger, but she's also she's sort of forced into this box. And it's like, I don't know about you. I feel like a lot of romance readers can relate to this idea that we never fit into societal expectations or conceptions of what constitutes for people who identify as women, like what does it mean to be a woman and things like that. And I always thought, well, I don't really girl very well. But so what does that mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I liked exploring that.
I think that you do a great job of exploring that. And something that I really loved about the themes in this book, where I think that's one of them, is how organically they were developed. Like they felt, the whole time I was reading this book, not to just gush, but I was so impressed.
Go ahead.
With your writing ability to convey such a compelling story that I wanted to read. I couldn't put down characters that were very believable and flawed, but with this overarching theme of being loved for who you are right now and really sort of finding freedom in that. And I just felt like it was just perfectly, beautifully done. and I loved it so
Nice.
much. And I'm probably not done gushing, but I just needed to tell you that.
Okay, well, sure, go ahead. And so a theme that I sort of come up with a lot is that our blood kin is often the people that we hope understand us and often don't. So we find the support and caring and compassion in our partners and in our friends. And so that's another thing that I feel like I keep, because Celeste has to sort of, her father is from the docks of London, and so is her brother, and she was from there too. And he really wants them to ascend in the social circle. So he's putting a lot of pressure on her to be as good, if not better, than the aristocrats, and including, sort of leaning on her to get engaged to an earl, which is like, oh my God, this is what a coup for us. But at the same time, it makes her miserable. And then Kieran's parents are, well, they're terrible, but it's like he gets support from his friends and his brother and, and his sister and things like that. So it's sort of like about being able to sort of, my husband's just outside the window. I'm sorry. He's doing a dance. Excuse me.
He has perfect timing. Just turn your camera around so we can see.
Yeah, I did not. That's for these eyes only. But that was pretty awesome. So what was I saying before my husband distracted me with his sexy dancing?
The
town family.
Yeah,
what's that?
The
pressures and things like that. Yeah, exactly. And sort of like being able to sort of accrue people around you, because there's sort of this power, I think, that comes from being able to choose the people who suit you well. And I think we're often told, well, like, your blood family is the one that means the most to you, but it's like, we didn't pick them, you know what I mean? And sometimes they don't understand us and we don't understand them. So by sort of like, as people who are now, we have social media and stuff like that we can sort of find a community around us and things. So that was very sort of significant motif for me.
I love that. And I think that idea resonates with so many people, specifically, I think, especially with maybe like more modern romance, not modern, but romance readers, I feel like, are always on the hunt for finding love and acceptance no matter what, with people that they can pick. And I just feel like that's a really lovely message that you put in there. And I mean, like, I say message, but like it's just sort of like a backseat type of bonus to the story, like, I just love it. So what were your favorite scenes that you wrote in this book?
Well, let's see. I like Kieran and Celeste's first scene together where he surprises her in the fitting room of the modiste shop. That was fun. I liked the scene where they're at the bakery sweet shop, because she gets to prove to him that she's a lot more than anybody thinks that she is. I liked, let's see, the scenes with her, what they're doing kind of like there's like the sanctioned scenes where it's like Celeste taking him to all like the right places and the right people and stuff like that. Those were cool, but I really liked writing the sort of like wilder underbelly, crazy side of London. So all of those scenes were fun. There's a crazy party, there's like a bohemian gathering at the theater, which was a ton of fun to write. Like, what would these like, no holds barred artsy sort of people do? And then, there's a slight spoiler, there's a poetry duel, which I was like, I don't remember seeing a ton of those in other romance novels. So I was pretty excited to get to, and then I got to write poetry, which I hadn't done in a long time. And I certainly had never written rhyming poetry. So that was fun for me to do.
That was one of my favorite scenes, the poetry battle. That was fantastic. That was perfectly done. And I love that you sort of built Kieran to have this very like sensitive side that he doesn't show with people. So when Celeste gets to see that, like, it's just another level of intimacy that's revealed that is just so well done. I love that so much.
Thanks.
So what exactly were you thinking of when you created Celeste's character? Like what did you envision for her end destination to be?
Well, like figuring out what she wanted for herself was kind of an evolutionary process in terms of as a writer. Like I wasn't sure what her end game or her ideal life would necessarily be. And that was something that evolved through the writing of the book so that she had this desire to make herself useful, but in what capacity. And so we reveal through the course of the book what it is that she actually wants to do with herself. And I feel like sometimes I like writing heroines with specific ambitions, but also it's interesting for me to write somebody who's exploring and learning and trying to figure it out. Because I always had a pretty good idea of what I wanted to do, but there's a lot, but I also go through periods where I don't. But there's a lot of people out there who are, my cats are banging on my door. There are lots of people who are still trying to figure it out, or they go through stages or evolutionary progression, or, you don't necessarily get spit out of high school and you're like, I know what I want, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I kind of wanted to sort of show how she evolved and sort of got to embrace the thing that made her happy and gave her purpose. And then also to find the person who supported her in that process, which is, I think, I always like writing, especially the hero who supports the heroine's ambition to rise. Because it's a historical, there's all kinds of certain external factors that are keeping her from doing what it is that she wants to do. But I never want any of that obstacle to come from the hero.
I love that. And I think that is very, very evident. It really feels so much like he is just sort of setting the path for her to like fly. Like none of the obstacles in her life come from him. And I love that so much. So where does Kieran rank on your favorite heroes that you've written?
Oh, that's a mean question, Crystal. You're a mean person and I don't like you. Actually, that's not true. I like you very much. That's tough. I really did enjoy writing him. I love a scoundrel. I just always have. And it's like, I imprinted on Han Solo and Indiana Jones. So if you give me, oddly, they're both iterations of the same actor, but that sort of scoundrelly attitude that he had seems to, it's not there anymore. But, that sort of like the grin, the playfulness, that's always been, but also with this like promise that like you're going to have a good time. Those are things that I've always enjoyed. So he's up there. I don't have a numerical ranking. Usually whoever I've just written is my favorite, but I really liked him because I did like to write an artistic person, a creative person, a fringe dweller, and somebody who has his own internal obstacles to overcome. So he's up there. Who's the guy at the bottom? I don't know.
None of them are. They're right. All like they're all up here.
Yeah.
So I feel like something that makes your character, specifically Celeste and Kieran in this book, so well done is how I feel like any reader who reads this book can see aspects of themselves, both in Kieran and in Celeste. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering, how much do you put of yourself into these characters? You don't have to be specific, but I'm wondering if you see bits of yourself in them.
I think, yes, they're all in some way an embodiment of an aspect of myself in certain regards. Either it's wish fulfillment because it's something that I would like to be, sort of like Jess in Would I Lie to the Duke. She's just like, take no prisoners, just has a head for business and all these things that I would never ever be. So I admire that. So it's like I was able to take the things about myself that I would like to be, and I was able to put that into that character. Or there's certain aspects or vulnerabilities or needs or things like that. The funny thing about writing these books is because I try to make them all different, but there's core stories and motifs. And the funny thing is that like I'm working through my own stuff by writing it. So it's like, you're paying for my book, but you're like, you're like, it's like I get to sort of like work through it through you. So thank you for being there for that.
But I feel like that's what makes it so relatable and makes it so there's really a connection there, like, so it goes both ways. It's a symbiotic relationship,
Okay, that's good. I feel better about that.
So I'm really curious about the backstory on how everybody met, like the three men specifically. But I think especially in the beginning of this book, you could tell that Celeste knew Kieran. Like there was some awareness of like, especially of like maybe an attraction level. And I loved getting to see that like bloom into, this person is beautiful and I'm attracted to them, but I didn't realize they had this aspect or they were
Right.
like this, So
Right.
I loved how you did that. But I'm really curious about how they all met. Would you ever consider doing like a prequel or like a novella or anything like that?
Well, in the yeah, it's funny because with the Union of the Rakes, we got to see them meet, which is when they all met in detention at Eton. There is no detention at Eton. I made that up. Usually punishment at Eton was getting a cane on your butt. But so I made that up. But in this one, in the third book, which I'm just about to write, which is Dom's book, we're going to go more into detail as to how Dom met, and he first meets Kieran, and then he'll meet Finn as a result of knowing Kieran. So I don't know if it's going to be like a legendary meeting, but they're going to know each other, and then from thence, that's how all the relationships kind of spread out. And Celeste comes into the picture, and other people come into the picture. I don't want to spoil the third book yet, but
I'm very excited. So I am extremely excited for Finn's book. So his is next. Is that right?
Yes, his book is How the Wallflower Was Won, and it's a marriage of convenience story.
Oh, that's very exciting. I really loved the bit that we got to see of him in this book, so I'm very excited for that. I know that the cover was just released. So
yes.
When is that scheduled to release again?
September 27th is the release date. Yes.
Okay. So 2 in 1 year, that's pretty spectacular.
Yeah, it's a lot. And as you know, I have other projects, including the I'd Like to F anthologies and things like that. We have another one coming up this year, which is Villain I'd Like to F, and that'll be out in November. So yeah, it's a full plate. So I need more caffeine and more chocolate.
So the book you're working on right now is Dom's. Do you know when that one might be released?
I don't know yet. I don't have a specific date. I think it's going to be early to mid spring of 2023.
Okay.
Yes.
So we do have a
no title or for that one yet.
Okay. So you've written I know you write other genres and subgenres under different pen names.
Mm-hmm.
So do you ever find yourself sort of pulling from those writing experiences for your historicals?
What do you mean, like in terms of experience?
Like, I guess maybe not experience, but like you do contemporaries, romances,
mm-hmm.
and I'm not entirely sure what else you do, but would you ever do you feel like the information that or the experience that you gain from writing in those other subgenres, does that translate into your historical romances? Do you feel like it's a similar writing method or writing style?
Well, it's kind of funny because I've been writing historical romance for so long. My first book came out in 2006, and that was when I was writing as Zoe Archer. So, and then I've done steampunk under that name. I did sci-fi under that name. I did paranormal also under that, a historical paranormal, the adventure romance and stuff like that with the Blades of the Rose and stuff. So the historical space is a very comfortable space for me because I feel like I've been there quite some time. But at the same time, I feel like it's impossible for me to separate my ideology out of it. So sometimes people are like, your books are too modern. And I'm like, people who are progressive have always been progressive, and you will find them. And then also it's just kind of like, and it's my ethos. This is my world, and I'm going to populate it and have it speak and model a world that I would like to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the contemporary is actually really interesting because it's I've been working on it a little bit, and it's like it's almost a little more challenging because I'm not that familiar with that voice. Because when I started writing romance, which was like in high school, because that's when I first started reading romance, my favorites were historical to read, and I started writing a historical romance when I was like 15 or something like that. So that's kind of my comfort zone to an extent. But I don't know, it's been really interesting, and I'm exploring new avenues even as we speak. So I'm kind of learning. The fun thing about this is like process always changes and evolves. It doesn't stay the same. So I get to learn what my process is. Almost sometimes it's frustrating or upsetting because I'm like, what's happening? But then at the same time, I'm like, oh, it's growing and changing. So I'm not the same writer that I was in 2006.
Okay. So we got a couple of questions in there, but I wanted to, before we will get to those really quickly, but I know you said that some people have said that, well, not some, but sometimes you hear that your historicals are a little too modern. And I think that it's interesting that you said that, because obviously with like the rise of Bridgerton, historical romances are reaching a broader audience. And I have noticed on TikTok, I've kind of been dabbling there, trying to figure out how to do book talk over there. That's definitely a much younger audience, people who are pretty new to romance. And so whenever I make TikToks about historical romance, your books are the ones that I often talk about, saying that if you're new to historicals and maybe you feel like, you know, you want something that's modern and has a really fresh contemporary type of feel, I always recommend your books. And so far it's been really well received. So I think,
oh, that's great.
Yeah, there's an audience for everyone. And I love all aspects of historical romance, but there's something that I think is so special about the way that you write them that has a modern feel, but also feels steeped in history too. So
thank you.
I really, really love that.
Yes.
Okay.
I keep meaning to go to TikTok, but I apparently have I was diagnosed with a level of ADHD, and I think TikTok would be hugely detrimental to my writing process, because then I would probably not. So when people post TikTok on Instagram, I'm like, oh, that's fun. I'm never going there. I'm so scared.
It's very, very easy to get stuck on TikTok and just keep watching one after another.
It looks like a lot of fun, and I'm frightened of it.
Okay, so Nina Andy asked, what is your writing process like? Do you plot out in advance or figure it out as you go?
Thanks for the question. I'm what I call a plotzer, which is basically I mostly plot, and then sometimes, and I do an outline. My husband, Nico, who was dancing earlier, he and I work out the outline and the plot ahead of time, and I write it out, and then I go based on that, I write the book. But as I'm writing, sometimes things change, or I'm like, it wouldn't happen like this. It doesn't feel right. The characters wouldn't do this at this point, or something like that. And so it leaves room to kind of be a little more fluid and flexible. So I definitely need to know where I'm going when I sit down to write. If I was just kind of like, then it would be very hard for me to get anything on the page. And having the arcs and things like that is the external action and the internal emotional arcs is important for me to know ahead of time.
I think that makes perfect sense. Having read your books, you can see that they're both so tightly connected that you can't take one away from the other, or it doesn't work. So I think you do an excellent job of that. So.
Thank you.
Okay, Megan asked, who would you dream cast for Kieran and Celeste?
So I'm often on social media talking about my hero inspirations in particular. And for Kieran, I had seen in my mind Aidan Turner, who you may know from such shows as Poldark or Being Human, or to a lesser extent, The Hobbit. In any event, I remember seeing him, I think, in Being Human, and I'm like, I've got my eye on you, sir. So this is actually the second time that I've used Aidan Turner as hero inspiration. He was also hero inspiration for Scandal Takes the Stage, which was also kind of a scoundrelly sort of fun guy. So he would be my Kieran, and you'll note that he and Finn's mother is Irish, so they get sort of her Black Irish looks from her, the dark hair and things like that. And for Celeste, I was thinking Sophie Skelton, but with her natural hair color, because I was looking for somebody who kind of looked like she would have a little spine, secret spine. Yeah,
definitely. Secret spine. That is the perfect way to describe her. She's so excellent. I love that.
Thank you.
So let's talk about the third act conflict without giving spoilers away, I guess.
Okay. All right.
So tell me how, I guess let's talk in general terms. So how do you determine what is going to make a compelling third act conflict without really devastating readers?
Well, I know it sometimes third act dark moments and conflict has been a subject of some controversy. Some people feel that it's necessary. Some people feel it's not necessary. I feel like I like to see it because I want to see the couple tested and to make sure that they can weather this, because we know people, when you close the pages of the book, like life goes on and a lot of shit happens, and it's like, can you get through this, especially with your partner? And so I wanted this, it's sort of like a microcosm of that testing. And
I love that idea.
It's not a secret that usually my villains are aristocratic white men.
So historically accurate.
Yeah. So and I try to, I feel like sometimes there's this impulse, that they make to make a villain physically unattractive, which I think is reductive and I don't like it. So I generally like to sort of package them like the ideal man, but inside it's rotten. And to sort of pit that society against the hero and the heroine. These are the things that they're pushing back against. And this is who they seek shelter in each other because of that culture in which they're immersed in societal expectations for both men and for women. Because I like to think, in a way, Kieran's poetic side challenges aspects of toxic masculinity.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So I sort of wanted to pit them against that. And also, you got to test them to make sure that this is something that they both really, really want and they're willing to fight for each other. And a lot of times for me, I like it when particularly the male main character to the female main character is like, look, you don't have to take me back. I just want you to be happy.
Yeah. That is perfection. Like, honestly, I feel like for me, that's my favorite type of moment in a romance novel, is when one of them, usually the male main character, says that he's willing to not, like, he's not going to force her, he's not going to sort of push her into what he wants her to be, because his number one goal is for her to be happy. And that is love. That is romance right there. And I love that. I love that you do that so much. That's perfect.
Thanks.
And I also really love that, I've mentioned Celeste a lot. I've mentioned how I really love her sort of unfurling her wings and finding joy and discovering things for herself that she wasn't able to. But I really like how you mentioned that about Kieran, how like his poetry writing, he very much had societal constraints upon him too. And I thought that was handled so well, where you could see both of them really finding their true selves together and loving each other for that. That was just beautiful.
Thanks.
Okay, we have another question. It is, do you have a favorite trope to write?
I kind of write heroes that are almost betas. They're not alphas. I don't have a good handle on writing alphas. I think other people do it better than I do. So for me, I've become very recently enamored and realized, especially with the writing of Temptations of a Wallflower, where the hero was a relatively sexually inexperienced vicar, and then in My Fake Rake, I really have discovered that I enjoy writing cinnamon roll heroes who are just absolute freaks in bed.
Yeah.
It's very niche, but for some reason it totally works for me.
I would agree. It works for you, and it's a heck of a ride. Honestly, I love it.
Oh my goodness. Kazi. It's okay. It's okay. I can do a little song and dance while we wait. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them while we have our a little momentary intermission. Oh, this is a good time for me to mention that first of all, if you have placed a print order for this book, especially through Love Sweet Arrow, we are experiencing supply chain issues. So I apologize for that. We're trying to get the books into people's hands as fast as we possibly can. Don't really know exactly when it's going to happen. I know that they're sort of slowly making their way onto bookstore shelves, and we're waiting to get them shipped to me so that I can sign them, and then I can send them to Love Sweet Arrow, and then you can get them to yourself. But also, if you haven't ordered an autographed book from Love Sweet Arrow, we have extended the deadline for that. So you can still order a signed book from Love Sweet Arrow. And when you get a signed book from Love Sweet Arrow, you will also get one of these 3 exclusive art prints that I had commissioned from the book. And they're only for people who are doing autographed copies through Love Sweet Arrow. So if there's still time, you can, I think Marissa's going to put the link up for you to place your order, so you can do that. And also just have a little patience. We're going to get the books to you as soon as we possibly can. Anticipation is so sweet. Just think of it like you're edging, and just imagine the release when you finally get that book. So anyway, I just wanted to take that moment to share that with you. So thank you. Welcome back, Crystal.
Thank you. I'm so sorry for the interruption. Hopefully he will be behaved now. My son just walked through the front door. Okay, so do you think that Kieran and Celeste would work? What other types of situations do you think would have resulted in them having a happily ever after?
That's a very interesting question, because part of what this process of their sort of secret interaction with each other is that they get to sort of be their truer selves with each other, and having this opportunity to understand that he's more than what she thinks he is, and she's definitely not what he thinks she is. So that's a really good question. I'm not entirely certain. I was able to concoct one scenario, and I'm pretty happy about that.
Sorry, I guess I was asking you to just plot on the fly, but I
can't do that. Plotting is very challenging for me. See the aforementioned writer husband who assists me tremendously in that process.
I think plotting sounds incredibly difficult. Yes. So I feel like Kieran and Celeste feel, and I feel like so many of your couples have felt like they it's almost like they found their missing part when they finally get together. And it always makes me wonder, if they hadn't had these circumstances, would they have had any other type of interaction where they would have found that with each other? But I feel like this specific one with Kieran and Celeste, where they have a deal, and like you said, they're in this opportunity where they see each other for who they really are. It feels like just this perfect opportunity, even while they have so much stacked against them, which I think says a whole lot about your ability to plot that out, because that seems like a very big undertaking and really incredible. But
Well, thank you. When I came up with the solution for how they got out of their conundrum, I was like, oh, hey, I figured it. I was very excited as it just kind of occurred to me, and I'm like, hey. But I mean, like it was an ongoing process. But I remember like, what's that missing piece? And then when that kind of came into being, I was like, very. We were both pleased, you and I.
That must be something really hard that authors go through that nobody talks about, is when you have those aha moments and you figure it out how to, like, you can't tell anybody because it's a spoiler, right? So, but then you've got your husband who's a writer.
Right. I have a writing community, and we see behind the scenes. We know what the back of the scenery flats look like, and what it looks like when you're doing your quick change backstage and you're in your underwear and you just don't care. It's like we get to see all of that. You know what I mean? So there's the fangirl component, and there's also like, this is the business stuff. And, I'm a member of a few author loops, and it's like, hey, I've got an issue. Can you help me figure it out? Or what do you think of that? And, then you kind of get people's feedback on it, which is pretty nice. The community can be really amazing.
That's incredible. I love that so much. So on average, would you say that you write regularly every day? Do you have like a schedule that you keep to?
Yes,
hours?
I do.
Yeah. What does that look like?
Well, I used to do, I remember back in the day, I used to do that thing where people would do like 1K 1 hour, which was like, you would it was a hashtag on Twitter where people would check in with each other and they would write for an hour and see if they could get 1,000 words within that hour. That became a little more
like a lot.
It is a lot. And I learned through Farah Roshan the Pomodoro technique, which is 25 minutes followed by a 5-minute break, and then 25 minutes. And then you do that like 4 times, take a longer break, and then come back. And for somebody who, as I said, has ADHD, it's a way more feasible. So I'm able to do that, and I can do it for longer. But yeah, I mean, this is my job. It's my full-time job. So I get up I don't lie in bed reading my correspondence and drinking hot cocoa until noon. I get up and make breakfast and then get to work. And if I'm feeling particularly virtuous, I get a workout in and stuff like that. But like, it needs to be regimented for me. And I also always have a to-do list and a planner, because I also have anxiety. So I like to know what's coming up and what needs to get taken care of. And I can be inattentive sometimes. So I want to make sure I know what I'm taking, like what I'm doing and stuff like that.
So since you sound like you are very regimented with your writing. So and it is your full-time job every day, inevitably there's going to be times when you feel maybe stuck, or would you say that still happens now, even though you've been writing for so long? And what do you do if that happens?
Well, I generally am not stuck per se. Sometimes that happens when I'm doing revisions, which is the most challenging part of my writing process is revisions. It's essential, but I really have a hard time with it. But it also makes the book way, way better. Sometimes I have days where I'm too depressed to work, and I just have to kind of let myself have those days. It's a little frustrating because like you want to work and you can't. But for the most part, I generally, like, the words come okay. It kind of has to do with the ideas, but and that's why I plot, because I don't want to get into that stuck thing. So I have a general idea as to where I'm going and how to get there and stuff like that. It just kind of has to depend on how my dopamine levels and my serotonin are functioning that day. And then I can kind of like move forward, based on that.
That's honestly really interesting. So would you say that because does that feel like it's maybe not easier, but more doable now in your career, whereas in the beginning, maybe that was more of a challenge, that you've learned how to deal with that through time?
Maybe. I think sort of managing my certain aspects of my sort of emotional regulation and things like that is something I need to do. When I was younger, I wrote a lot faster. but I've also written a lot of books. The Good Girl's Guide to Rakes is my 33rd published romance.
That's
So
incredible.
thank you.
Wow.
So it's like, it's at the beginning, I can kind of disgorge all these words and stuff like that. And now the more I've written, the more I like, I don't want to duplicate what I've done before. And then also, I'm pushing 50. So I'm just not that fast anymore. When I hear about people who can do days where they do 3,000 words, 5,000 words, it's easy to feel inadequate because I can't do that. It was Theodore Roosevelt who said comparison is the thief of joy. And it's like, I have to, and social media can be wonderful and it can also make you feel really terrible. So you have to know kind of when to step away, because I can't produce at the rate that some other people produce. And there are other people who can't produce at my rate. You know what I mean? So it's like everybody's kind of coming at it from a different perspective, and all process is good. And if anybody out there is a writer, a pre-published writer, and somebody gives them an absolute rule for writing, then know that rule is bullshit, because everybody's different.
I love that. I love that so much. So this was your 33rd book. Is that right? Is that what you just said? 33rd?
Yes.
Good Girl.
Yeah, but I also wrote a literary fiction novel under my real name, which didn't go, but it got published, but it was a small press and stuff like that. So technically it's like and then I also did an adaptation of a Hallmark movie, not an original book, but an adaptation of a movie that had already come out. So those are kind of like asterisks, but like romance, wholly original, 33.
Mm-hmm. That's incredibly impressive. So are there things that you want to include in your books that you haven't yet? Maybe like, are there things you want to try that you have, like maybe tropes? I feel like after 33 books, maybe you've covered all the tropes, but
it's amazing. There's still more.
Is there anything that maybe feels like maybe a dream or something you'd like to put in one of your books, but you just haven't found the right book for it yet?
Well, what's been nice about this last story that I wrote for Rake I'd Like to F was that it was an 18th century story, and I'd always wanted to write 18th century romance. It's my favorite era, but it was at the time that I was marketing myself, it wasn't very market friendly. There was only a couple of authors who were really, and Regency was kind of where it was at, and I liked Regency, so I was happy to do it. Mm-hmm. But I'd love to write more 18th century. I'd love to write non-aristocratic characters. That's would be nice. It's not my experience, but I don't come from people like that. I'm a Jewish American person, and it's like, I don't know anything about dukes. And I mean, I do know a lot about dukes, but there's nothing about my experience that comes from it. So I'd like to kind of explore more about people who don't necessarily come from inherited wealth who also deserve love. That would be something that I would really like to explore. And there's always new tropes, you know what I mean? It's like somebody asked me today if I'd ever written a Beauty and the Beast, and I'm like, you know what? I don't think I ever have.
Oh my gosh, I would die if you wrote one. That's literally like my favorite trope.
Oh, really?
Yes. That would be amazing. So there was a moment in The Good Girl's Guide to Rakes where Kieran mentioned something along the lines to when Celeste sort of dresses in disguise to go to the underground, when he says something about how he loves her as that other Sloane, right? Was that her?
Salome,
that's right. And she was like, well, why do you like her so much? And his response was, because that's who you really are when you dress as her. It's not, you're not putting on a show for anyone. That's who you really are. And I felt like that moment right there, I think, is the epitome of what makes romance so appealing to so many people, is to find that one person who recognizes this is who you really are, and this is the person that I want to be with. So what do you know of a moment like that in books that you love? What books have moments like that you've read, maybe by other authors?
That's interesting. I'm thinking of like some of my absolute favorite romances because my keeper shelf is pretty small. Um, but trying to think about that. Oh, you got me on the spot. I'm just trying to think of like a specific moment. Now I'm looking at my books because I'm trying to remember. I've read
That
so
was a
many.
pretty specific question. I'm sorry.
It's all right. That's all right. I'm just gosh. God, I wish I had an answer for you. But I'll have to think about that. I just
Because
really, one of the things that really I really like is when the thing that draws the characters together, particularly if you're writing a heterosexual pairing, if the male main character is drawn to the female main character, not because of what she looks like, it's because of what's inside her. And I'd like to think that regardless of what this is, because this doesn't determine whether or not we deserve love. I mean, we have no control over this. And but there's something innate and internal, you know what I mean? There's a fire or an energy or a perception or something like that. And like the way that the person is perceiving the world around them. Like these are the things to me that are lovable. You know what I mean? Regardless of whether or not somebody is a certain size or their face adheres to a certain standard of beauty and things like that. So those moments when but at the same time that the male main character finds that it is beautiful, that those things are beautiful, you know what I mean? And the female main character, regardless of what this looks like, they are beautiful to that person, like what constitutes beauty, like that something is, within the character that makes them worthy of loving.
I love that so much. I recently read oh my gosh, I can't even think of the title. It's a Sherry Thomas book. I think it's Tempting. No, it's not Tempting the Bride. His at Night. That Sherry Thomas book. When the male main character is like a spy, and so he puts on this act where he's kind of like a dummy. And they have this moment where the couple, like, they meet across the room and there's this spark of attraction. And then when she gets talking to him and he's putting on his dummy act, she's like, wow, you are growing less attractive the longer that you keep talking to me. And I feel like that was such an interesting moment where it was initially this beautiful person that they were attracted to. And then the more they got talking, it was like, not really feeling it so much. So I love taking that and turning it around and seeing that, yes, this person, there's some type of attraction there, but when you peel back the layers, there's so much more that just makes you want to just be with this person and never separate.
I remember in my wild young single days when I was like at clubs or bars or whatever, and I would start talking to somebody who I initially thought was very attractive. And then as words were coming out of their mouths, I was like,
yeah,
it's just like, it just sort of like, the attractiveness sort of like diminished considerably, and especially because at the time I was in graduate school and like I had these specific ideas as to what I thought constituted like a cool, like somebody that I wanted to be with and stuff like that. But even so, there's like a sort of a native sort of understanding and humor and stuff like that. And that just, I was like, wah, wah. And I'm like, well, I gotta go.
Oh, poor guys never even knew it, right?
No, they had no idea, but that's all right. They're fine.
Okay, we did get another question that someone wants to know, what are the books that have made it to your keeper shelf?
Well, let me check I'm gonna run back here because I need to remind myself. So I found just like right off the top of like my keeper shelf. I have two historicals and a paranormal. This is Cressley Cole's Dark Needs at Night's Edge. I know it's really early in the Immortals After Dark series, relatively speaking, still my favorite.
That one's
Absolutely.
my favorite too. That one is absolutely my favorite.
It's like culty, but it's
Yeah.
got like a cult of people who love it. And I know that Sarah McLean also respects it a lot, which is, so I feel validated if Sarah McLean likes something that I like. And then Julian Long's The Perils of Pleasure. I think he's a scoundrel in this one too. And the heroine is kind of like a fixer, but her writing is spectacular. And she's so good that I actually haven't read her in years because her voice is so specific that I just don't want to try to imitate her. Mm-hmm. So I have all of her books on my shelf and I'm like, someday books, someday I'll read you. And then I have a bunch of contemporaries, but they're on my Kindle, so I'd have to look through those. Adriana Herrera's American Dreamer. I think that's definitely a keeper. She also has a historical coming out this spring called A Caribbean Heiress in Paris. And so
I just heard about that just recently. That looks
so
amazing.
Good. Yeah, it's awesome. And then also Joanna Bourne's The Black Hawk.
Oh, yes.
Her writing, I don't know if she's still writing anymore, but I love her. I loved her stuff. I love it still.
So that makes me wonder, since you do write every day, do you make time or find time to read often? Or
well, it's challenging because the thing that got me into writing was reading. Mm-hmm. Writing romance specifically, I should say, because I started writing when I was like a little kid, but writing romance was reading romance. And I kind of like had to kind of take a step away from it, or I read a lot of contemporary romance now because it's not necessarily like what I'm doing. The pandemic really robbed me of my ability to concentrate. So it actually was kind of terrifying because it was almost like a year that I barely read. And then the funniest thing, I don't know why randomly I picked up Nikki Sloane's The Pool Boy. And that it opened the gates back open. So I don't read as much as I'd like to, but I definitely have started to read more than I did before that.
The Pool Boy is one of my favorite books, and it's not something it's not the type of book that I seek out, but I loved that. So I love that sort of reignited that for you. It was compelling in the best possible way, and 5 out of 5 flames.
Yeah, I mean, I went into it with certain expectations and it exceeded those expectations. And it always bothers me when somebody says, this book surprised me with how good it was. Because I'm like, well, what are screw you. But there was a lot of depth to it and it just really sort of, just like when I read Morning Glory Milking Farm. I'm like, okay, what's this Minotaur book that everybody's reading? So I picked it up and I'm like, what? This is so good. I never thought a book about Minotaur hand jobs could be so tender and delightful.
So you're selling me on that one, because when you said you went into The Pool Boy with a certain set of expectations, like I did too, and I was ready for a good time, but the depth in that book really surprised me, which I am realizing sounds very rude as I am saying it, but it just wasn't what I was expecting. But I have stayed away from the Minotaur ones, but you're making me want to pick it up.
Do you like world building?
I do. I love world building.
I think you'd really like it then, because it really has some pretty exceptional world building, and it is grounded in a lot of really sort of, the situation seems hyperbolic, but the characters are very grounded in sort of known emotion and experience.
Okay, I just moved that to the top of my TBR now. To get to it for sure. So is there anything that you can tell us about Finn's book? Maybe a little tiny secret?
Well, we meet Finn's heroine at the end, maybe about 2/3 of the way into the Good Girl's Guide to Rakes, and he actually is going to try to fix her up with Dom in book 2, and that goes awry. So I just really the other thing, if you really just to wet your whistle, is that the hero inspiration was Tom Ellis, aka Lucifer. So and also this book is a little on the longer side. That's because there are so many sex scenes. There are so many sex scenes.
Yes. Add to cart, pre-order right now.
Yeah, I mean, you can pre-order it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's up for pre-order now.
Okay, awesome. That's wonderful. That sounds amazing. I've seen your Twitter post about Lucifer, that he was sort of the inspiration for him, and I am extremely excited for his book. I mean, he piqued my interest in The Good Girl's Guide to Rakes, so I was already very much ready, but now I'm like, I need it today.
If you, like me, watched Lucifer and were really disappointed with the lack of graphic sex scenes, then,
So
take
would you
a chance.
say it's maybe one of your steamier ones then?
Yes. Just sheer volume.
We love that. We are here for that.
Yes. I think there are twice as many sex scenes in Finn's book, how the Wallflower Was Won, than there even was in Good Girl's Guide to Rakes. And that's a pretty steamy book. So
yeah. All right. Well,
yeah. I can't stop, won't stop.
I have so enjoyed this conversation with you. I'm not sure. Do you know how long this live is scheduled to go for? Do we have any more questions from the audience?
I don't know. Marissa, just let us know. No more questions. All right.
We can keep talking. We've got more things to talk about.
Well, we want to make sure everyone can get back to their lives, but I'm here for you if need be. Dinner's already made, so it's good. It's 6:00 in California. So yeah.
So do you have plans already for what you're going to write after this series? How far ahead do you plan out your book?
I have some ideas. I have some ideas as to what's coming up next. One of them is totally bananas. And we'll just kind of see. I'm trying to stay nimble, and just kind of see where the inspiration strikes me, at this stage in my life and in my career. There's definitely going to be, there's villain I'd like to F, which is, there's always more ILFs, which is great.
So is that, you said that's coming out in the fall? Is that?
Yes, I think right? It's the middle or end of November is Villain I'd Like to F, and that is available for pre-order. It will be available both digitally and in paperback.
Is that going to have the same authors?
Yes, we've got the band back together again. So it will be myself, Adriana Herrera, Joanna Shoup, Nicola Davidson, and the inestimable Sierra Simone.
Yes. That's inestimable. That is the perfect way to say it. Okay, let's see. So Nicole asked, will we see Willa again?
Maybe. Wink. I don't want to spoil it, but it's entirely possible.
Yeah. Well, I think that is all the questions that I have for you. I'm not sure if there's anything else that we want to cover. I honestly, I can say with surety that The Good Girl's Guide to Rakes is definitely making it on my top books of the year. It was completely enjoyable. I loved everything about it. I loved the characters. I loved the family dynamic, the found family aspect. I can't wait to get the other two men's stories. And I love that they're centered around, I mean, it's instead of like having a group of women, it's the group of men. I love that so much. It's fantastic. So that was That was wonderful. And I have been recommending it to everyone, and it's going to be one of those books that I'm never going to shut up about, because that's how much I loved it. I feel like there's so much to enjoy in this book, just as purely a reading experience, but there's also so much to talk about and discuss and really think about. And those are my favorite types of books. So it was fantastic.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here tonight. Your great questions and indulging me in my rants.
I loved it. I love talking to you. Everything that you said was just fantastic. This is a book lover's dream. So thank you so much for putting up with my questions, even the off the wall ones.
You're very welcome. Sure. Hopefully I'll be able to come up with answers maybe at 3:00 this morning.
Yeah, that's usually when I think of other questions I would have asked you too.
Right. Cool. Thank you very much. Thank you to Love Sweet Arrow for hosting us, and to everybody who joined us here today. I really appreciate you coming out and supporting independent bookstores and romance.
It was great. Thank you so